30, 40 people.
Oh, that's not bad.
Chairman, you may proceed.
All right. Good morning, everyone. This is a meeting of the Planning Commission of the City of Rehoboth, and it's a joint meeting as well with the Board of Commissioners of the city. And we welcome all of you. I would ask that the Secretary of the Planning Commission call the roll, please.
Yes, Commissioner Kaufman,
Present.
Commissioner Covington,
Here.
Commissioner Dewey,
John, you're
Commissioner
muted.
Dewey. You're muted.
He's not muted, but his microphone is not working.
Oh, okay. Commissioner Hunter,
Here.
Commissioner Strange,
Present, thank you.
Commissioner Ellison,
Here.
Jim is muted as well.
well, he's here.
Right.
Commissioner Macha,
Okay.
here. I think that's everybody that I see. Commissioner Bryan,
I'm here.
of course, Commissioner Davis.
All right. This
And,
meeting is.
Thank you, and I'm Mayor Mills. I will call roll on behalf of the Board of Commissioners. Commissioner Sharnowski? Not yet here, apparently. Commissioner Sharp?
Here.
Commissioner Jay Legree?
Here.
Commissioner Patrick Gossett?
Here.
Commissioner Susan Gay?
Here.
Commissioner Tim Bennett? Apparently not here yet. We'll keep an eye out for him. And Mayor Stan Mills. So we have a quorum of the commissioners and are able to formally conduct business. Thank you, Mike.
All right, sir. Our consultant, Lauren Good with Wallace Montgomery, will join us in just a few minutes. She had another meeting that apparently ran over into this, so I expect her to join in at any moment. The point and purpose of today's meeting, of course, is to elicit the thoughts of the Board of Commissioners in our ongoing process of drafting the latest revision of the CDP. And so would ask that the planning commissioners allow them to give their thoughts, their views, and we will then take that into account when we meet again, which I believe is on January 5th of next year. It's hard to believe, 2022. So having said that, I would ask, first of all, as to public comment, we will defer public comment to a future date. There will be time for public comment, but we need to work through the process that we're engaged in at the moment in hopes of getting enough information together and a consensus reached so that the CDP can be issued as in a better form, a better draft form. That date of release is scheduled for December 21st. So that's rolling up very quickly. Tom West, I believe you're here as well, I hope.
Yes, I am.
Tom, would you like to give us basically an introduction of what the topics are and where we are today?
Sure, I'd be glad to. Good morning, commissioners, members of the Planning Commission, and the public. I've been asked as the city planner to just give an overview or set the stage for the presentation Lauren will be getting into shortly. One of the documents that is a part of the agenda is a memo I put together that helps set the stage a bit. So I'm just going to briefly go through that, what it's about. So it's really talking about this meeting, this joint meeting, and where it sits in the process. So if you've seen the agenda, it has a timeline built into it that basically says there's 3 stages to it and where we are, which is really at the tail end of the first stage, the plan building stage. And we're about to go into the public review stage of it. So it's setting the stage by showing you where we are in that process right now. And then it talks about the rest of the process, the public review part of it, and then the plan implementation, just some high-level bullet points. It also talks about breakdown of some of the upcoming meetings for target dates. And lastly, that beginning, the last part is providing the web link to the city's website that city staff are working on with Wallace Montgomery to put the plan materials there. And then when the public comment process starts, that's where the public would use that as a portal to get information and submit their comments to the city. The other part of the memo talks about, and I don't think, and I apologize that it may not be in the copy uploaded, it was sent in, and it refers to the second couple paragraphs about the CDP, Comprehensive Development Plan purpose. So it may not be on your copy, but I wanted to read it. It's just an overview of how a planner would look at this process and the significance of it. So it says that the draft document itself, the one we're reviewing, contains a thorough description of a CDP in Chapter 1, Executive Summary, Role of Comprehensive Development Plan, which is good. It gives you more information. But at a high level, it's important also just for us to talk about a CDP provides a reference or guide for all municipal programs, ordinances, and activities. But it doesn't always or usually describe the detailed solutions those initiatives cover. Its primary and uniquely valuable purpose is to describe the community's vision for itself as clearly as possible. Successful CDP documents contain clear visions for the community along with goals and action statements to guide decisions, establish programs and priorities, and successfully address and incorporate different perspectives. This unique purpose is especially important when communities are confronted by change, whether it's positive or negative, that can drastically alter priorities, presenting unforeseen challenges or opportunities. When change occurs, a community should be able to refer to its CDP to proactively make decisions that align with adoptive visions. That's versus reactively reacting to things that come up. The last paragraph talks about creating and maintaining a successful CDP requires the community to deliberate and reach consensus on a variety of issues, which is where we're at right now. As the project transitions from plan draft to plan review and adoption phase, it'll be essential for the city to ensure its visions and positions are clearly defined to provide a solid foundation for the goals and actions that are in the chapters of that document. Once the city provides the foundation at this stage, it'll be much easier for those referring to the eventual adopted plan to make decisions that are aligned with community priorities and can be consistently and effectively applied. So I don't see if Lauren's on yet. I'll just offer a few more thoughts on this. Lauren's going to go in her initial part of her presentation. The first several slides are on the vision statements, on the positions of the city, and on the goals and actions. And Planning Commission members have seen this. They're very familiar with this process. The Board of Commissioners, if you've looked at some of the past meetings, you'll also be familiar with it. This is not the details of the plan. It's really the vision and positions and goals. This is the part that it's really important for us to have a clear set of policy. This is the policy. Right now, if you look at the comments, which are really good, our task before us is to reconcile them. There's questions in there. There's different perspectives on things. And really at the end of this process, moving into when the plan's compiled, it needs to be the city's position and the city's vision and the city's goals. So that's the task ahead of us. I've been involved in many comprehensive plans, developing them. This is a really key part of it. And I look forward to working with you and Wallace Montgomery on trying to make that happen. I don't know if Lauren's here yet. Mike, have you spoken with her?
Not since late yesterday, but I knew that she was going to have a bit of a delay getting to us, but the hope was it would be at most 10 or 15 minutes.
Sure.
So we're close to that. I did neglect to ask the city secretary, Ms. Womack, you did publish notice of this meeting, correct?
Yes, sir, I did.
Let's see here. The agenda was posted on December 8th at City Hall and on the city portal. It was amended on December 9th and December 13th and was reposted at City Hall and on the city portal. That's all I have, Chair.
Thank you. Mr. Mayor Mills, in terms of procedure, I assume that you will be calling upon the members of the Board of Commissioners to speak as appropriate. That's really not something I will do, that you will take care of that aspect of it procedurally. Is that correct?
That's correct.
All right. Lauren Good has joined us from Wallace Montgomery. Lauren, are you here verbally and physically? I can't hear you.
I'm connected virtually. Can you hear me now?
Yes.
Wonderful. Thank you so much, and I apologize for my delay. Had a little meeting scheduling mix up, but I'm glad I could make it. And just let me know when you are good to have us just kind of jump right on in.
We are. Tom West has given his overview, reviewed his memo that he submitted, and we are ready to move on into your presentation and development of issues, and hopefully a consensus on some of these issues that we need to get resolved.
Wonderful. So I will go ahead and share my screen. Can you see that all right?
I can.
Yes.
Wonderful. Okay. Of course, this is the second draft that we have worked on, incorporating comments that we heard from the Planning Commission members on the first draft. So that is the primary topic of today's discussion. If we don't get to some of the later part of this agenda, that's fine. This is going to be an ongoing conversation, but we wanted to make sure that we set the base line at the very beginning. So we wanted to go over the visions that had been not only originally developed, but then incorporated comments from Planning Commission, and similarly with the official city positions, and then get into more of the chapter by chapter information as time allows. And just to bring everyone up to speed, these visions, they began, or we started with the ones that are in the 2010 plan, and looked to them to see if they are still relevant, if they're still reflecting the correct information, and are identifying where you want to see the city go over the next 10 to 20 years. So again, these have incorporated Planning Commission comments, but obviously we did receive comments from both groups, and when there are particular comments that were more relevant to the discussion beyond just, this word should be changed to this other word, we've tried to incorporate them in these slides, but we're definitely looking to all of you to make sure that we are on the right track, that these are the components that you want to see for the plan. So with that, the first vision that we'll be discussing is the vision for water resources. And here the vision is for the careful use and preservation of the city's various water resources, which are really at the heart of its social and economic vitality. The highest priority is the care and protection of Rehoboth's great natural resources, providing careful access to the water, protecting views to and from the water, maintaining appropriate scale and use of structures along the water, etc. And that the guiding principles are really looking to preservation of natural processes connected to those various water bodies, adapting to address climate change and sea level rise impacts that we will be seeing in the future, and continuing that appeal of Rehoboth's water areas. The one comment that we received that was most relevant to this discussion was really this, the city has to prepare for those inevitable effects of sea level rise, and relatedly address an urgent need for a comprehensive stormwater management plan. So with that, I will open up the discussion. Again, if you have any comments or questions about this, if you're in agreement or it's missing something or contains something it shouldn't, that's the kind of feedback that we are looking for.
For the commissioners, it'd probably be easiest if you use the electronic raise hand so that I can see you while this presentation is on a shared screen. Are there anybody would like to say anything from the Board of Commissioners? I'm not seeing any hands up, so feel free to proceed.
Okay.
I'm sorry, Stan, I couldn't find the button quick enough, but this is Patrick Gossett.
Yes, sir.
If you could help me understand in here where these are the natural resources, but in the vision statements also, where are we talking about any of the natural waters or wellhead protection or infrastructure, that type of thing for wastewater, storm management, that type of thing? We mentioned stormwater management here, but with regards to wastewater management and also wellhead protection, is that addressed in any of the visions, Lauren, or where would that appear?
So right now there are 5 different visions, and I think it is the ones that you just brought up. I believe that they straddle both this vision for water resources, because of course it's the water element, but then also community services, because those are, as you mentioned, water, sewer, stormwater. Those are services that are provided. Not necessarily solely by the city, but those are services provided to the community. So if those are areas that you think should be elaborated or specifically called out in one or more of these, please let us know.
I guess the only one of major concern to me, a top priority, is wellhead protection. I know it's mentioned in the plan on page 623 for an awareness aspect, but I just believe with the growth within the area and the need for additional services of greater water, that our wellhead protection is something that we need to further highlight or further investigate.
And if you, let's see, I'm trying to find the map itself. Map number 8, which covers environmental features. That does provide the locations of both the wellhead protection areas and excellent recharge areas. And according to the latest data from DENREC, there are no excellent recharge areas within the city's boundaries. And then there are just along the, let's call this the sort of northwestern border that parallels Henlopen Avenue, there are 2 wellhead protection areas that straddle the city line, but are actually, the actual physical well locations are in Henlopen Acres. And then there are a number of additional wells as well. But for right now, according to the most recent data that we have, there are only 2 of those areas that do straddle that the city boundary.
Thank you.
Seeing no other hands from the commissioners, you may proceed, Lauren. Thank you.
The second vision is for city character. For those of you familiar with the 2010 plan, this used to be combined as city character and community services, but that was one of the comments that I felt is more appropriate to split those 2 apart. So here, looking at city character, we want to highlight the unique character and charm that is that is all Rehoboth, that expanded from its origins to a community that is characterized by its amenities, its natural, historical, and cultural protection, and supporting inclusivity for all citizens, workers, and visitors within and to the city. Here, additionally, this is a community where residents, property owners, tourists, and whether those are retirees, business people, individuals, or families, find a home, a recreation, security, inclusion, and a sense of that permanence and pride that people are often looking for. And it's a blend of that residence and resort town that really draws and helps to maintain a loyal tourist clientele. And here, I did want to point out that these are vision statements. So while they may not address, or the descriptions may not be what the city is today, this is that starting point for where the city wants to be in the next 10 to 20 years or even later. With that, one of the comments that we did receive was that while we did separate this statement from the one on more of the services, it still veers a little bit too far into those items, according to this commenter. And this should have more information about the city's physical character, including its buildings, its human scale, its streetscapes, et cetera. There was also comments more generally that we heard not liking that term self-sustaining, so making sure that we find more appropriate language to use to reflect the idea for the future.
Any questions by the commissioners? Hearing none, right, proceed. Lauren, thank you.
Okay. And here's that vision for community services. So identifying that Rehoboth is a year-round, full-service community with seasonal tourism that serves as the major industry. It maintains significant infrastructure to serve all its community interests, the natural environment, residences, businesses, tourists, and its function within the region. Of course, there are those services that are critical that we think about that highlights quality of life, such as having open spaces in restaurants and shopping, arts and culture, all of those various components. And this is really saying that the city is really striving to not necessarily provide them itself, but make it an environment where those can occur. It also goes on to note that the vision is that while we know that there will be cars and buses and trucks for at least the foreseeable future, really this vision wants to see the balance tilted more toward the pedestrian and cyclist side of things and give them more prominence. Again, here it's important that when we continue to evolve, our technology continues to evolve, the community has the best communication access as possible to not only city government, but its businesses, neighbors, and residents, and all others within the city. And that this next sentence was one that we had several comments on, so we are going to be revising the language, but I believe the point here was that the city is not the only responsible party for providing these community services. That also falls to, in part, Sussex County or some of the neighboring jurisdictions, or even some of the organizations or groups that are both within the city and external to it, providing those services to those that live, work, and visit the city. And vice versa, The city also offers a wide range of services to not only its own residents and businesses, but to those in Sussex County, neighboring jurisdictions, tourists, etc. So the comments, some of the relevant comments that we heard related to this was that, again, while the pedestrian and cyclist priority may not be, or it may be a goal, still the vast majority of access is by automobile. And then this was a question about that last sentence in the vision. So I hope I at least verbally tried to clarify what was meant, and we will work to refine that language to more accurately reflect its intended meaning.
Any questions by the commissioners? This is Mayor Sam Mills. I echo that second bullet, and that needs massaging greatly, in fact. Any other commissioners? Commissioner Susan Gay?
Yes. First of all, I think several people had commented on this in the draft, an urgent care facility. We don't have an urgent care facility in the city, do we?
Actually, we do. It's, I think it's within the old Thunderbird shop.
But it,
The second block of Rehoboth Avenue.
Okay.
yeah, but it's not operational yet.
Okay. Okay, so it's going to be there in the
Well, they have a coming, last time I recall, they have a coming soon sign on the front of the.
And, and then and I'm glad to hear about the clarification for the services, but I also think, especially now that we are going through great extent to the design manual and standards for wireless communication, I think it's important for the comment or the sentence about 21st century technology to incorporate something about in keeping with the character of the city, or in keeping with the design standards developed, or something like that, because we are going to a great deal of, we had a great deal of discussion and are zeroing in on that now. So I just think it's important that the technology reflect that.
Any other commissioners? Seeing none, you can proceed, Laura.
The next is a vision for neighborhoods. Here, the Rehoboth's residential areas reflect a small town neighborliness that is embodied by its diverse and forward-looking citizenry. Rehoboth is a retreat. It has its green places, ocean spaces, and those memories that a lot of us grew up with. The community takes pride in the care and appearance of property within within its borders, its buildings and streets. There's the quality and preservation of the natural environment, history and historic places, and it's work to retain places that hold that special beauty and interest. The city pays attention to the physical connections that provide that link between what may have occurred in the past to today. So still recognizing, again, history and historic places, but building on them and bringing those into the current time. Also paying attention to the connections between home and work, resident and visitor. The neighborhoods are walkable, bikeable. They've got diverse architecture and dwelling types, spacing and sizes, and that the property owners and residents really share the responsibility for the year-round care and appearance of their properties that help to make the community have that appearance that it does. So some of the comments that we heard related to this were a request to have some more information on the different neighborhood physical attributes themselves. And one commenter referenced and provided information from I believe it was the 1996 CDP or long range plan that had more specific descriptions of six neighborhoods. But this was asking to identify those and provide a little bit more information there. And then wanting to really complement and maintain the existing residential density and pedestrian scale.
Any questions by the commissioners? I echo the second bullet, but if we're going to acknowledge different neighborhoods, I'd like to see a reference where it came from. Commissioner Gossett, can you refresh our memory? Did that come from the long-range plan, the original long-range plan, or did that come from the neighborhood preservation ordinance?
No, it originally came from the 1996 long-range plan. This is the survey that was conducted by the University of Delaware students and volunteers that prepared this as part of the 96 long-range plan, as it was called then. That was a basis for the incorporation in the neighborhood preservation ordinance of 2000, but it originated in the 96 long-range plan.
Very good, thank you. Any other commissioners' comments? Seeing none, we'll move on, Lauren.
Okay. And just to a little additional information, we do have a slide in a few terms here that does note it. We want to make sure that the neighborhoods that we are identifying, that they're still accurately represented. The boundaries are still what we would consider to be those various neighborhoods, et cetera. So that's something that we can work with the city on to make sure that we're getting that right as we incorporate it into the next draft.
Thank you.
And then the last vision that was identified was a vision for business. So here, the city's downtown is a mix of year-round and seasonal businesses, and the downtown again has that distinctive pedestrian character. There's that mix of businesses. Again, the vision for this area is that it is controlled in architecture and signage. The residential scale of buildings is linked to the surroundings and to pedestrians. Again, really reiterating that the downtown is oriented to pedestrians and cyclists first, and to vehicles second. And there's a mix of both private and public uses, year-round and seasonal. There's locally owned, some high-end small businesses, and that similar to the previous slide where the residents were responsible for year-round care and appearance, here business owners and property owners share in that responsibility as a way to maintain the overall viability of that downtown area. So comments that we heard on this were that there are currently not architectural controls, while there is zoning, et cetera, and the language here about it being controlled in architecture and signage does not reflect the current conditions. So again, this is looking at a vision for the future, and is that appropriate language to incorporate. The next comment is that the term high-end might be misleading. There's a mix of the types of businesses that are present, and that perhaps using more of a distinction between retail restaurants and service providers versus high-end or similar language would be more appropriate. And the next comment really wants to make sure that we're not implying that business is on a downturn, or that there are more accommodations that are needed than currently given to make businesses successful. Excuse me.
This is Mayor Mills. We'll entertain any questions from the commissioners. I will say I echo all of the bullets, but particularly high end. We have the gamut there, from T-shirt shops up to fancy, expensive retail stores selling clothing, and the same thing in the dining scene, et cetera. So I would echo that. Are there any commissioners that have any comments? I see no hands. We'll continue moving forward. Thank you, Lauren.
All right, thank you. Okay. So that wrapped up the visions, but still tied to those are city positions on a variety of topics. So as part of the requirements, of course, we know that the state outlines required components that have to be included in a comprehensive plan. And the Office of State Planning Coordination provides some additional guidance on how to address that. And one of those is to develop official city positions on a number of these topic areas. So what we've done on these slides is to identify what the actual position is that we are discussing. Toward the right of that teal bar are some notes from state planning about what might go into developing that position. On the left side, again, is the position that is currently in draft form, and then some of the relevant comments that we have heard.
Those pile up to the point where the business unit's being throttled. We're seeing a dozen or more business units being throttled since Salesforce popped off. Yeah. So it is likely related to the Salesforce integration, but it's probably a symptom.
Who was just talking? I almost think it was outside this meeting.
I was wondering the same thing, and
I'm sorry. Somebody was speaking and I couldn't hear loud enough nor identify him. I almost think it was coming from outside the meeting. But anyhow, they're not identifying themselves, so that might be the case. Lauren, go ahead and continue. Sorry for the interruption.
So the draft position here is again, the city has a unique character and charm that's all its own. Again, looking back at its history as a camp meeting site, Rehoboth has chosen to grow and change both physically and socially from its origins, but still working to protect key elements that help to set it apart from other beach resorts on the eastern seaboard. So here, the city emphasizes its inclusivity, offers a blend of the old and the new, supports development and redevelopment that's appropriate to being a premier seaside destination and home for those people that are looking for that traditional small town atmosphere and charm. Some of the comments that we heard, I was again looking at the city's unique charm, character, history, and sense of place, supporting appropriate development and redevelopment while still preserving that seaside destination status. A note about some of the survey responses that were submitted. 92% of survey respondents wanted to maintain that small town atmosphere, and 92% also wanted to encourage environmental practices and planning. And that number bumps up to 96% when we're looking at those that think that protection of natural areas and open spaces should be encouraged. And then just noting that this should be a careful blend of both the residents and resort factors that really works to draw people to the area, to the beaches, to the open public spaces and the businesses that are within the city limits.
Any commissioner comments?
Mayor, Commissioner Snutsky here. I just want to echo, I think it is appropriate to add in here the encouragement of environmental practices and planning.
As chair of the environmental committee, I think that would be appropriate, Ed. Thank you. Any other commissioners, comments? Seeing none, we'll let you proceed, Lauren.
Okay. And if any of you are following along in the draft, these are taken slightly out of order, but we thought it would make sense to logically progress through these in the way that we've laid them out. So the next position is that on population growth. This is the one that state planning did not provide any specific guidance on. But the draft position is that the city does acknowledge some likely growth into the future. Its population numbers have been relatively stable since the 1950s. It has a geographically small size and is already features a lot of development. So that means that future population growth would likely need to be accommodated by redeveloping or taken care of with existing development. And I do see we've got a typo in there, so we'll make sure to correct that. But then in contrast, the city's desirability as a resort community is just increasing. So the seasonal populations will likely continue to grow. And tied to both of those is the importance of trying to strengthen coordination efforts between the city, the county, and neighboring municipalities to have some kind of a voice in decisions that are made external to the city's boundaries, but still directly affecting them. And that includes impacts to the services, utilities, other public facilities that the city provides. So here, some of the comments that we received was that the statement that the population has been relatively stable since the 1950s, that may not be the best way to phrase that that statement. That might not actually be the case. Another comment that while the in-town numbers are may not have changed, there has been significant growth that has occurred outside the city limits in the county, and that has actually led to an expectation for services, shopping, and restaurants that people expect the city to be able to attract and retain. I'll skip that third bullet for just a moment. Note that this commenter wants to make sure that whatever the end position is, that it recognizes both the full-time and seasonal residents, because they are different and they do have different impacts to the city. The third bullet that I skipped over, this was in relation to not only this position, but some of the statistics that were used in the document. So we wanted to make sure to make sure everyone was on the same page with the what figures and sources that we were using. I'm not entirely sure the other city documents what those documents are referencing. The numbers that were provided along with this comment referenced population projections that were done by a different organization based on, I believe it was the 2018 population estimates. So the figures, for the most part, that we have used in this document are a combination of the 2000 and 2010 census information to provide a historic benchmark, if you will, but then the 2015-2019 American Community Survey data, which is a product of the Census Bureau. That's the most recent of that series that has been released, and that won't be updated until I think it's looking like March of next year is when the next round will come out. And then as we were, we know that some 2020 census data has been released, but the full breadth of it has not been released yet. And as we were scoping this project, that was one of the items that it was decided that we would not want to be revising those statistics continuously as we're still very unsure of when those results will be fully released by the Census Bureau. So just trying to give a little bit more insight to why our figures may not be directly the same as some others, but we've definitely tried to make sure that we are sourcing all of those, and I can answer any additional questions that anyone may have about that.
Thank you, Lauren. Ed, your hand's still up. Do you have another comment?
No, sir, that was left over from before.
All right, thank you. Any other commissioners? Seeing none, we'll ask you to proceed, Lauren.
The next is the position on housing growth. So here, there's an identification that in more recent years, housing growth in the city has been driven more by the replacement of some of the older, smaller homes within the city with newer construction, and that this is a trend that is likely to continue due to market forces. Although there have been some legislation more recently enacted that attempts to control, to put some component of control to that with lot size and floor area ratio requirements. Of course, we know that property values have gone up, as has the city's popularity, and there's a concern about the availability of affordable and attainable housing in and near the city, and that improving access to mixed use or mixed income workforce housing would be a goal. Whether that is through future development of a mixed-use housing zone that could also serve to almost provide a buffer between what may be incompatible land uses that would negatively impact residents' quality of life. Related to all of that is a desire to continue and increase communication and coordination efforts with the county and Rehoboth's neighbors, particularly relating to the residential development that may occur in those areas outside of current boundaries that may have the potential to negatively impact the adequacy of city services and facilities. So here, let's see. Looks like we've incorporated most of that first bullet already, but just making sure to note that the replacement of some of those older, smaller homes does have an impact on neighborhood scale and density. There's a question about what was meant by mixed-use housing providing protection from incompatible encroachments. So this was, from our perspective, more of a sort of providing the ability for a transitional use so that you wouldn't necessarily have, larger lot, single-family housing directly adjacent to a more intensive commercial development. As an example, this would provide more of a transition from one to the other. This next commenter wanted to remove remove that reference to the incompatible encroachments, noting that when people bought their properties, they knew or should have known what they were buying, and that it shouldn't impact future commercial development or redevelopment. The next is a question about whether it really is imperative to plan with the county. Is this an effort that makes sense and that would be worthwhile to try to achieve? Another comment that housing is mostly limited to renovation or replacement of existing houses, and we're seeing a greater pressure to build larger houses on smaller lots. to provide, for example, rental income to help offset costs, or to maximize personal investments if not going with a rental route. And that really should not be the driving force for developing this position on housing growth. And then one more comment that perhaps this position should reference a potential new zone or zones, perhaps more clearly or explicitly than is already incorporated.
Thank you. This is Mayor Mills. Before I entertain any questions for the commissioners, let me make a couple comments. One is on this statement that in the vision statement related to this is the desire to increase communication and coordination with the county and neighboring jurisdictions. I've been in office 14 years, partnered with the county on different projects. I've met with the county on different things, talked with them. I want to be brief, I guess, about it because I'm afraid the county will be watching. But, this is one of those situations where it's a valid goal. I would say we still seek it out the best we can, but we've got to understand the county is not necessarily receptive to us coming to them and telling them what to do. And just as we as a city are likely not that receptive to the county coming to us or other local jurisdictions coming to us and telling us how we should be doing our business. So it's just, there's a delicate balance there, and I'm just sharing my perspective. Let me go to commissioners. Anybody have their hand up? Commissioner Susan Gay.
Yes, thanks, Mayor. I first of all, before I get into the other two, I was going to say I agree with you about the challenge with working with the county, and I think, and this may be outside the scope of this particular draft position, I think it's a great goal, and I guess I wonder if somewhere else in the detail of the document we could specify the need for an MOU with the county, because I want to make sure that whatever we have in the CDP is realistic, and so that people's expectations are not, they don't have expectations that we can't meet. So I'm glad you said that, because that truly is a challenge. My two comments were going to be about, first of all, I like the draft position statement very much. I think the protecting neighborhoods from incompatible encroachments is a very valid statement to make in there. It goes along with one of the messages that was loud and clear from the survey, which is protecting neighborhoods from encroachment by non-residential uses. There was a very high percentage of people who said that was an important goal for the city. But Lauren, you used a great word when you're talking about, I guess, the incorporating mixed use. You mentioned transition zones. And we actually sort of have that already with between commercial and residential, in that we have a C3 less dense commercial zone that backs up to residential. So I guess I might like it if you include in the draft position statement that transition word somewhere, or the need for transition zones. I think would be helpful as a general part of our statement.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner Chernowski.
Thanks, Mayor. I just want to echo, while I understand that it is a delicate balance with the county, I think we had a lot of citizen comments just recently comment about this related to the proposal for the outfall. And the overdevelopment in the county is certainly going to have negative effects on the city, without question. And I don't know that it's the city's responsibility in an official way, but we certainly should be encouraging our residents to, just like they come to our meetings, they can go to the county meetings, they can voice their concerns about the potential impacts of the development in the county without, and the infrastructure concerns that they may have. So I do think it's delicate, but I think it does need to be addressed somewhere.
Thank you, Commissioner. Tom West, and then Commissioner Gossett.
On that same point of planning with the county, I guess is the term I'd use. It is challenging. Delaware doesn't really mandate it the way other states do. In some states, the county and municipality need to review each other's development plans. They are required in Delaware to review the CDP. So part of this process, we will need Rehoboth will need to send its CDP to the county so that they can weigh in on it and provide feedback. I think that as a goal, it's important probably to keep it in there. It's the how we do it. There are a number of mechanisms. In the past, I've attended plus review meetings on behalf of a municipality talking with the state and the county. And that's always been a cooperative, I think, receptive process where they're sharing ideas on traffic or water or environmental issues. So there's that. Mayor Mills serves as chairman on the Association of Coastal Towns, which is, I think, has paid some benefits off already in networking with not only the municipality and the county, but representatives. And I think one other thing to mention, I was working up the road in Lewis on Sussex County was working on a Henlopen Transportation Improvement District, which they were working with the state. It was if you're not familiar, it's the way to fund improvements on transportation as development's occurring. And the city of Lewis worked with Sussex County, which was very open to it, to change their original Henlopen Transportation Improvement District to include a Lewis one. So I think I would agree and echo that it's challenging in Delaware, but there are opportunities. And I think as a goal, it would be helpful to remain in the CDP. It's what we do when we get to the hows of what some action statements are. And I agree with Commissioner Gay that, there are things, she's already mentioned one that it would be useful to include in that.
Thank you, Tom. I'm not saying take it out. I'm just suggesting that we have reasonable expectations.
Right. Yeah, I was just offering some, I think I heard that too. I was just offering ideas to elaborate ways to do it. It is challenging.
Very good. Thank you, Tom. Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, thank you. I would also agree in sort of the implementation standpoint of this that, Mr. West, if you could help include some of those action steps that are possible. I mean, these are aspirational goals that we're looking for, but when if you will, the rubber meets the road of how to really implement those, that is certainly coming in the future of drafting this document, but sort of some options that could be used to implement them. I also think that the aspect of this incompatible encroachments need to really be investigated. I've always thought that, our zoning codes are kind of developed back in the 70s as Euclidean zoning, and that one size fits all. But I think that as the needs and the growth of Rehoboth and the area and the change in basically the needs of our residents have developed, that we really need to take a strong look at the actual zoning codes that we have in place and to see if they're really applicable of how that property is being used currently. We've also heard some words or options about form-based codes to apply to our town center area or something of that nature. So again, I think that this incompatible encroachments needs to be expanded upon, maybe not in this particular position, draft position, but elsewhere, so that we can really look at, do our current zoning codes really meet the needs of the future growth of the city? Thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, I don't see any other commissioners with their hands up. Lauren, please proceed.
Our next, our next position is on the general use of land. Here, the position notes that the city is small, about 1 square mile in size, and it has opportunities for adaptive reuse and redevelopment of key properties. Recognize that there's always going to be a life cycle to buildings and their uses, and this position identifies that in the future, new tools should be identified or developed to help accommodate that change. And then goes on to just note that future uses should really complement and maintain the current residential density and pedestrian scale that is present, and that there should be increased attention paid to protecting remaining natural and environmental features. Here, there was a question about does new tools mean form-based codes? As Commissioner just mentioned, that's certainly something that I think potentially is on the table, but we don't, at least from our standpoint, we didn't necessarily want to limit it because we never know what new technology may be coming out or what new best practices may be employed in other areas that we may want to research and take advantage of. The next comment is really that, again, future uses should be consistent with the residential or pedestrian scale that's present, and the heightened concern for environmental protection. And then the last comment is that more attention should be paid to land use compatibility issues and zoning enforcement.
Thank you, Lauren. Any Commissioner Gossett?
Yes, again, just the general land use, I think all of us are, again, just to highlight my comments from earlier, is that these new tools or new ways of looking at things, our zoning codes were developed in the 70s and really have only been band-aided to change them in a reactionary way. So I think this is a really great opportunity to utilize the CDP to take a look at new tools. Mentioned form-based codes. There are other aspects of rezoning or zoning overlay sections, what have you, to look at the future 5, 10, 20 years from now, and again, how the actual neighborhoods are being used, specifically like Schoolview. I mean, those are larger homes on larger lots, but our zoning code matches the zoning codes that are used in other sections of the city. So again, I think this is a great opportunity to take a very hard and actionable look at those zoning changes or zonings that are in place, and are they actually being used today as they were, first written about in the 70s. Thank you.
Thank you. Seeing no other commissioner hands up, Lauren, go ahead and proceed, please.
Okay. The next is the position on key infrastructure issues. Here, all infrastructure within the city is important, and it needs to be maintained in compliance with current codes. Just an aside, current, we would mean the current as of the reading of this, so not necessarily today, but if we're reading this plan 8 years in the future, what those codes are at that time. And the conditions should be up to date and state of the art when possible. The city needs to prepare for the inevitable effects of sea level rise, which includes a longer hurricane season, more frequent and powerful storms. It should take a look at stormwater management needs, and also look at ways to harden key infrastructure against those impacts. For example, taking a look at power, water, sewage, emergency communications, telecommunication, et cetera. Those actions would, of course, require coordination and support from other entities and providers of key services, because again, the city does not provide all of these services, and frankly doesn't have the capability to do all of that in a vacuum. There's also a need related to this for increased regional planning efforts with neighboring towns, the county, and the state. And in addition to some of those more traditional infrastructure like water and sewer, particularly looking at transportation issues that of course cross boundaries. So here, some of the comments were asking a question that Commissioner, that you just asked, do we need to recognize a need for changes to the code, or at least looking into whether there are needed changes. And then this commenter noted that as its highest priority, the city should develop plans to address stormwater management needs and look at ways to modernize and harden that key infrastructure.
Thank you, Lauren. Commissioner Susan Gay?
Yeah, I would be remiss if I didn't say that somewhere under the key infrastructure in the draft position should be the phrase green infrastructure. The commissioners actually agreed in February of 2019 that it would be incorporated into any city projects. And I think obviously related to stormwater management, but I just think the term should definitely be in there, especially with the plan that is supposed to be relevant for the next 10 years. It's going to be increasingly important as we go forward.
Thank you, Susan. Seeing no other comments, no hands raised by the other commissioners, we'll proceed.
Okay. Excuse me. The next position is on redevelopment potential. Here, the city should continue to encourage redevelopment of commercial properties subject to overall planning goals and compatibility with existing scale, density, and architectural character. Again, future redevelopment efforts should address those heightened concerns about environmental protection. Comments here noted that this position really should be based on maintaining the scale of the city and keeping in mind the existing character.
Thank you, Lauren. Any commissioner comments? Seeing none, we'll continue.
Great. The next position is on the expansion of boundaries or annexation. Here, careful consideration should be given to the future expansion of city boundaries through annexation. State code provides that areas that are being considered as possibilities for future annexation are shown within the adopted CDP. And that because the city is concerned with the impact of future development outside its current boundaries, it has shown an area on an accompanying annexation map. So right now that is map 5. The area that is shown is generous, but comprises a consistent area in terms of current development and future development potential. Apologize for the typo there. While the city has no immediate plans to proactively seek annexation of property that is shown on this map, it would entertain petitions from within those identified areas through the normal annexation request process. As part of that, we want to pay particular attention to the adequacy of public facilities in those areas. So comments here reiterating that the city does not have immediate plans for annexation and that residents have not encouraged and are not desiring annexation. At least that's the information that we've gotten in some of our outreach efforts. And the next commenter actually recommended a smaller annexation growth area than what is shown in the 2010 CDP.
Thank you, Lauren. This is one of the areas that I believe is misunderstood and needs clarification. Therefore, I've asked Glenn to help us clarify this. This observation is based upon my reading of some of the comments that have been written on this topic, where it seems that some believe that if you believe in bullet number 1, then we should just take it out of the CDP. Based on my knowledge from gained from the 2010 CDP, which may have changed, that's why I want to have Glenn address this, is that the annexation is a requirement required element of the CDP. It must be in there. It's not optional. And that while the city has no plans, as the vision says, to proactively go out and knock on doors and seek annexation of that area, it does identify areas that we would entertain petitioners coming from outside the city and saying that they would like to become a part of the city. Anyhow, would you like to explain from the beginning on the need to do this?
Sure, Mayor. That is correct. And I don't know if Lauren or perhaps Tom has shared the Office of State Planning Coordination's document with the Board of Commissioners or the Planning Commission, but there's an actual document that lays out how you create a CDP, and there's a checklist. And annexation is one of those items in the checklist that has to be included within the plan. And that all comes from Title 22, where it lays out the requirement for municipalities to create comprehensive plans, and it gives a definition there. So it's Section 702 of Title 22, subsection B says a comprehensive plan means a document in text and maps containing at a minimum. So here's where that list of items that has to be in the plan comes from. It says containing at a minimum a municipal development strategy setting forth the jurisdiction's position on population and housing growth within the jurisdiction. Then it says expansion of its boundaries. So that's the annexation requirement, expansion of its boundaries. Development of adjacent areas, redevelopment potential, community character, and so it goes on and gives all those things. But that's where the requirement that annexation be addressed within the plan comes from. Does that clarify it?
It clarifies it for me. Does anybody have any questions among the Planning Commission members or the Board of Commissioners relative to this topic of annexation and the requirement? Commissioner Gossett?
Just a comment, just to confirm, Glenn, the annexation process, if you will, is laid out in the city charter, correct?
That's correct. There are some requirements in state law as well, but the procedural way that it would annexations occur in the city are found in the charter.
And again, by my recollection, it's not the city that's proactive and goes out and seek annexation, but we are reactive to petitioners from outside the city coming to us and asking to be petitioned.
But even if that were the case, that land or the potential folks that come to us have to be described within this map of the CDP. Is that correct?
That's right.
That's correct. Yes, sir.
So if they're not on the map, they can't apply basically for annexation.
Well, they could apply, Commissioner, but the process then would be the city would consider whether it had an interest in annexing, and if it did have an interest, you'd have to go through the comprehensive plan amendment procedure to show that as an annexation area.
Thank you.
And currently, Canal Corcoran is the only area that's
I'm
included
sorry,
on the map.
who's talking? Identify yourself, please.
Sorry, Commissioner Shinusky.
Yes, sir. Go ahead, Commissioner.
Yeah, I just wanted clarification. Canal Corcoran is the only area identified on that map, is my recollection. Is that correct?
Lauren or Tom, have you reviewed it? I've not seen the map recently.
If you don't mind me scrolling quickly, I did have a,
Okay.
see if this will work. A link to show what's being shown. So on the right-hand side of the screen right now, that is the map that was in the 2010 CDP. On the left-hand side is what is currently in the draft CDP. We did not make, we meaning Wallace Montgomery, we did not make modifications to this. In some areas that may look a little different, there were some changes to how some of the parcels were drawn. So for example, you see the large green swath that goes out into the ocean. That's just a change in how the GIS data was graphically portrayed. The other, let's see, I think that's primarily, I think that's the only real change here. Of course, making sure that we have the most recent growth area boundaries of the adjacent municipalities as well, and that's something that is kept on file with the Office of State Planning.
One point of clarification, this is Tom West. The map shows the areas, but one of the requirements are that they're contiguous with the city. So a parcel on that map that's out, not directly touching the city, would not qualify even though it's on this map. So so that's just a requirement of the state annexation process that they have to be contiguous.
And similarly, not create enclaves or donut holes or things like that. Not, like Tom mentioned, not leapfrogging properties or anything. So just having a consistent boundary that incorporates all of the land within it.
Just so that members of the public watching and all of us understand, the map on the right is within the 2010 CDP, identifying the areas for annexation in light blue. And the map on the left side is the current draft CDP with the proposed areas for annexation identified in orange. You can see they're almost virtually the same. To reiterate Tom's point, that areas on the opposite side of Route 1, by example, would not be contiguous with the city of Rehoboth, and so would not be considered for potential annexation based upon this map, if that's what we go with. Any further questions from the commissioners or even the Planning Commission members? I see no hands, so we'll let you go back to that previous slide and continue, Lauren. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Related to that is the position on development of adjacent areas. So this would be not looking as much at annexation, but what takes place in those areas directly adjacent to the city that may be under either another municipality's purview or the county. So here, the draft position is that open land near the city's boundaries is rapidly being developed as both commercial and residentially. As part of, and that's taking place in Sussex County, and again, the adjacent municipalities through their land use and development approval processes. These activities and the development are adding strain to city resources, whether that's water, sewer, traffic, et cetera. And noting that in the future, the region generally would benefit from increased communication and cooperation, paying careful consideration to future development and its impacts to the community. So this slightly echoes some of the statements heard earlier. Here, some of the comments were that perhaps we should be more specific than careful consideration of development impacts to the community, and just come right out and say that those joint planning efforts should occur. And then this is similar to the mayor's comments that people want to hear that we'll work with the county to prevent development that adversely impacts the city, but not sure if that's realistic or making sure that we have realistic expectations for how that might or might not occur.
Thank you. Any questions from the commissioners? Seeing no hands up, let's continue, Lauren.
Okay. The next is the position on critical community development issues. Here, the city, as true of many smaller communities, is facing pressures that can make it challenging for maintaining characteristics that drew so many people to the city, whether that's at a residential, business, or investor type level. Some of the emerging issues that the city will likely face are newer or more prominent environmental challenges. One, being causes of the effects of climate change, so sea level rise, temperature increases, heavier precipitation events, et cetera, as well as some social challenges or social issues, such as providing for an aging population or making sure that people who desire to can age in place or things of that nature. Here, there is a comment about a disconnect between businesses and homeowners with the city, and that as a somewhat of a customer service organization, there should be a commitment to provide a high customer or business experience, and that's essential for the city's viability and success. So that's kind of getting at some more of the economic related community development issues as well.
Any questions by the commissioners? Seeing none, we'll move on. You may proceed, Lauren.
Okay. That wraps up the city positions. So again, we will work to modify based on the comments from today, as well as some of the other comments that we have that we've received and heard. And with that, we'll move into some of the comments that we've heard on various chapters. So we're starting with chapter 2 here. Chapter 1, again, is the the executive summary and visions. So the majority of that chapter is what we just discussed. So rather than reiterate that, we'll move on to the chapter 2, which is the introduction, and look at the planning process itself. This chapter goes over the authority to plan. So some of the references that Glenn was making are identified in this section. There's some information about comprehensive development planning history, some of the past efforts, what has driven them, and what have been some of the primary focus of those various efforts over the years. There is a section on the current process that we're working on right now, how that occurred, and some of its different components, and then a higher level overview of public participation and what has occurred or not occurred due to COVID, unfortunately, and related issues. On the public participation side, we do want to note that there is a more robust section on public participation as part of the appendix, but here we just wanted to provide that higher level initial take at various components. Obviously, these slides do not encompass all of the comments that we received. If it did, we would be still having this discussion in 2032, I think. So we wanted to pull out the ones that were that we thought warranted some additional discussion, or at least wanting to make sure that either there were no objections or that everyone was on the same page with moving forward with any of those comments. We obviously have received all of those comments, so we don't want you to think that we forgot about any of them. So for this chapter, there were a handful of comments that were received, again, just as providing background to more of the more robust topic areas that we'll get to in a moment. But one of the comments was that the description of the 2010 CDP and its process listed some of the key focus areas and priority actions. This comment suggested providing more of a status update on those various items, or perhaps relocating a much more detailed status, project status to an appendix, which my reading of that would almost reflect an exercise that was completed close to when the CDP planning process started a number of years ago, and looking at each of the identified action items. The next comment was, again, that partnering with or having better communications with the county is a valid goal, but it's a challenge to achieve. Then we did receive some comments or requests to incorporate some additional goals or action items from the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee, and I apologize. We tried to abbreviate some of these so that it wouldn't take up the full slide. So if you're seeing any of those abbreviations, that's why they may not be specifically verbatim to what they're actually called. But those requested items were to specify or require native trees and plantings, including pollinator plants, to try and prohibit application of lawn fertilizers and pesticides that harm the environment, periodically review all of the city's tree-related policies and ordinances, reduce or remove invasive species within the city, and to annually commit necessary financial resources to support the green environment.
Thank you, Lauren. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I just want to clarify, and thank you, Lauren, for incorporating those comments. And this is sort of a statement, a general philosophical statement about the nature and the timing of public comment, in addition to some of the specific ones there. First of all, I feel strongly that our committee members have a special expertise and work very closely on important issues within the city. This is all our committees. And I had wanted for the committee participation to be at a slightly earlier time than the general public review because of the expertise they bring to it. For that reason, I sent the draft to the Trees and Green Infrastructure Committee members. Now, I will also say this: there is no, this is not a committee statement. These are from the individuals. There were partly because of time and partly because the goal was not to reach a consensus within the committee, but to have those people with special expertise, with subject matter expertise, to weigh in on the draft, much in the same way we have. In other words, our comments were not, we didn't achieve a consensus at the commissioner level before we submitted comments for draft 2. Same thing with my committee. And in fact, I would frankly urge all of the committee members and all of the chairs to seek input, because as I said, I think this is a level of expertise that we need and that we may not get during the general public comment. So that's why they're there. And certainly if as a body, as a decision-making body, we don't incorporate all of them, that's fine. I mean, it's however it shakes out, but that's the derivation of those comments.
Thank you, Susan. Any other comments by the commissioners? I see no hands up, so we'll continue. Lauren?
Okay. And please, I also want to reiterate that these were the comments that we saw that we felt would be good to bring up. If there are others that you feel strongly about that you want to bring up as well, please do so. We're not trying to specifically limit comments to only those that are bullet pointed on the screen. The next chapter is number 3 on community character and the community profile. So this chapter goes over the city's history, its the community design, some of its historical resources, highlights the city government, that structure and its organization, as well as some community organizations, both within the community and that help to serve the community. The community profile itself is more of a statistical or demographic look at where the city's been and where it currently is. And then highlighting some of the events and observations that go on within the city. So here, comments that we heard were that the goals and actions in this chapter need to be broader than just addressing historic buildings. They noted that there had been some discussions about investigating the formation of a historic building board, possibly cooperating with the Historical Society and Museum to increase public awareness and appreciation of those buildings and resources. There was an opposing viewpoint to that, that the city already has that Historical Society and Museum, and historical structures have been identified. And is it really necessary to appoint a new panel of experts when there's already the Historical Society and it's an organization that the city supports? The next comment is that there should be improved two-way communication with city residents, businesses, and visitors. A comment that perhaps during implementation, there should be a general review of the city government structure to take a hard look at whether it's really appropriate for current and future needs, or if any changes might be warranted. Here's where I mentioned this earlier, a request to add more detailed descriptions of the city's neighborhoods and referring to the 1996 long-range plan. Again, that's something that if we move forward with that, we want to make sure that those boundaries and descriptions are still accurate. The next comment was a section about residential demolition and replacement, and the related comment, the commenter suggested just removing that discussion altogether, noting that the city shouldn't impose their view on personal property rights, and that if someone purchases property and they build according to the adopted code, then the city shouldn't dictate if they're able to keep what's there, rebuild, or build anew on their privately owned property. There's a section on architectural characteristics and styles. This was added in response to some comments that stemmed from draft 1 to provide some more information about the built environment itself. This comment is that while it's good information, it's interesting information, asking, is it really pertinent to requirements of the comprehensive plan, or can it be, would we be better suited if it was shifted into an appendix? Another comment about offering incentives to make it more economically feasible to renovate or restore historic dwellings as opposed to demolishing them and building new. There were some different opinions on whether the city had just the right number of events already, had too many events, or didn't have enough events, and what that may mean in general in terms of economic development or tourism or things of that nature. And note that preserving the city's overall character and small town charm isn't just about its historic resources, but is a broader value statement about the city's scale and character as a whole. And then there have been quite a few comments, and those are somewhat conflicting about the community organizations that were identified. These were in part developed closer to the, I believe, the beginning of the process, where organizations were identified and both sent questionnaires asking for information, as well as some in-person or telephone type interviews to gain more information about the organizations, whether it was appropriate to keep this discussion in the plan, whether that discussion should be removed and just perhaps kept as a resource, or should that information be relocated to an appendix. That comment has sort of repeated itself between the first draft and this. We had just identified the community organizations in this chapter and moved more of the questionnaire responses to the appendix, but definitely want to make sure that we are making those adjustments as is desired.
Thank you, Lauren. I'm going to ask that question specifically of the commissioners in a minute, but Commissioner Jay Legree, you've had your hand up a while. Do you want to start, please?
Yes, thank you, Mayor. I would like to make a comment on general comment instead of stopping at every spot. The Planning Commission and the Board of Commissioners have submitted phenomenal comments, and I've read them. And I have also attended the Planning Commission meeting. And there are some really good ideas and really good suggestions. And I hope that the consultant will carefully consider those, because these suggestions are coming from people with boots on the ground. And I know it's going to take time, but we should, those comments and questions should be carefully gone through and analyzed, and try to refrain from cherry picking and just give it a good hard go, because there are some great comments from the Planning and the Board of Commissioners. Thanks, Mayor.
Thank you. Well, with that, I would like to get any commissioners' opinions on this last bullet about what to do about community organizations. I believe one of my comments actually indicated, should we consider identifying those community organizations that have physical places within the city. So I'm leaning toward that. All the organizations, yeah, could be listed in an appendix, but again, I'm leaning toward that we specifically identify organizations within the incorporated limits of the city of Rehoboth Beach. Commissioner Gay?
Yeah, I think I agree with that, Mayor. First of all, in looking at a few other CDPs from other Delaware towns, that seems to be what they do. And it just seems to be the norm. So I would agree with that.
Any other commissioners?
Yes, Commissioner Gossett here. I would agree with that. I think that doing it in the manner that's currently portrayed in the CDP adds to the confusion of individuals that think they live in Rehoboth Beach. If I had been asked a question with regards to an organization I belong to, such as an example here, Meals on Wheels, Lewis Rehoboth, their physical presence maybe serves Rehoboth, but again, it is not located within the city limits. And I think there has been a continuing misunderstanding of just where Rehoboth Beach is, and do I live there or do I not live there? And I think relocating this and distinguishing those individuals or those organizations that actually have a physical presence in the city would be much more clear and help people understand what the city limits are, really.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioner comments?
Edward Chinusky, I agree with that completely. I guess my question is, what community organizations had input that are not in the city limits? The only thing I can think of is SOLA 3, perhaps.
Sola's in the city.
Oh, well then, then what organizations have we received input from that are not?
Yeah, I didn't think there were any, honestly.
There are a bunch on the list. I don't have the list in front of me, but I know there were a bunch on the list, and I don't know how many provided feedback or how many were just listed as community organizations. Same difference. We don't necessarily want to list them if they're not in the city.
I have the list in front of me, and I mean, again, I don't know who responded, but it's organizations, as I mentioned, Cape Henlopen Food Basket, Community Resource Center, Delaware Native Plant Society, Delaware Nature Society, Faith United Methodist Church, Friends of the Cape Henlopen State Park, Meals on Wheels, Rehoboth Beach Bears, Rehoboth Beach Sister Cities Association, the Sussex Family YMCA. Those organizations, again, I don't know if they responded to the outreach, but they really, some of them don't have physical presence here. But so I just think segmenting them, if they did respond, is the way to kind of make it clearer.
I agree with that completely. I didn't realize the list was that extensive.
So,
And just as a clarifying point, all of those organizations that that were identified, and I believe on page 1.6, sort of before the chapter 1 starts, where we just acknowledge some of the community organizations, and then again, this information is in the plan itself. These are all ones where we have a either a questionnaire that was completed by the organization or completed by someone on their behalf. A planning commission member conducted an interview with them. So we do have for each of those some type of documentation with each of those organizations' information.
Thank you for everybody's comment. I'm going to try to summarize it. It sounds like the majority of the commissioners are comfortable with identifying the community organizations within the CDP, those that we've identified as having physical locations within the city, and that for those all of the totality of the community organizations, we relocate them to the appendix, still with identifying those that are located within the incorporated limits of the city. And then as far as the questionnaires that are done, that for me, that if they are not, I don't know where the questionnaires go. If they're all in the appendix, that's fine. But if any of the community organizations' statements are in the main body of the CDP, I think they should be limited to those, again, that have physical locations inside the city. And for those organizations that have physical locations outside the city, put their statement within the appendix. Is there any further comment among the commissioners?
I just have one other thing.
Yes, ma'am. Commissioner Gay, go ahead.
Yeah, I think this might be elsewhere in the document, but I just thought of it, so I wanted to throw it out there. Somewhere in there is also a statement about our supporting all of the community organizations, and even marketing them and promoting them and all this kind of stuff. And I think that also needs to be looked at again, and for that to reflect only organizations within the city. Otherwise, there's an expectation built up that we're going to support these 20 organizations that aren't present in the city, and I don't think that that's the intent.
I think that's a good point. Also, if I recall, there may be within that same section that it would be support, even monetary support. So that I agree with you, Commissioner Gay. That should be questioned. Any other commissioner comments? Hearing none, we'll continue to move forward. Lauren, thank you.
Thank you. Chapter 4 discusses land use and annexation. So here we have sections on the planning environment. So this provides some baseline information or background information related to for example, the state mapping, the county's comprehensive plan, that type of information. So it sort of sets the stage for some of the local land use efforts. Then there's a section on existing land use, future land use, zoning, annexation, and then a discussion of intergovernmental coordination. So related to that, there are some comments that this person hadn't really heard of any annexation concerns other than along Rehoboth Avenue Extended from the Circle to Route 1. I will come back to that second bullet point in a moment. Another comment about mixed-use regulations that encourage high-quality design by providing greater flexibility and more control. That comment that is already in the document needs some further explanation. There was a suggestion that Table 4-5, which identifies some of the zoning code amendments that have occurred since the last plan's adoption. It gives a brief description of what those amendments were. This comment was suggesting that we provide the actual code language within the appendix and not just provide those brief descriptions in the table. A suggestion to examine and evaluate the effectiveness and applicability of form-based codes. I'll skip to the bottom one. A comment that land use compatibility and zoning enforcement needs some additional attention. So the two that I skipped, the one closer to the end is that discussion on the reason to annex land, and I think that we've done that for the most part. That we've noted that this isn't city initiated. This is saying that any of the lands shown on the map, that's something that the city would be willing to entertain an application, but it would have to go through that process, and it's not guaranteed. So as part of that, we again just want to confirm whether the land that's shown on the map here, again, the current map is the one on the left that shows in the orange hash marks the proposed annexation growth area, that this is the area that you want incorporated in the draft, that this is the area that you are that you would be okay considering those requests. Again, that very closely mirrors the 2010 map that was developed.
Commissioner Snutsky here. I don't know why we would be including anything west of Route 1. Yeah, that's my comment.
Thank you, Commissioner. This is Mayor Mills. Because the annexation process involves petitioners coming to us and then going through a public hearing process, correct, Glenn? Because it goes through a public hearing process, there would be a lot of analysis and a lot of public input from citizens of Rehoboth Beach. It's not moot. Because of all that, I would be comfortable just maintaining the outline of what was proposed in the 2010 CDP and carrying that over to the current CDP. Any further comments by commissioners? Commissioner Gossett?
Sorry. Patrick Gossett here. Just have a clarification. Mr. West, you earlier when we were talking about the subject stated that the annexation land must be contiguous to the current boundaries of the city. Is that correct?
Yes, that's correct. It has to be contiguous with the city or contiguous to, well, if anything's annexed, it would be annexed into the city. Sometimes annexation strategies include parcels in between them. Okay. But you cannot annex in unless it's contiguous.
Well, I just, again, this is technical and maybe in the weeds, but just something we noticed the canal there that backs up to the other properties on the western side of the canal. The city only owns a portion of the canal banks. The canal is owned by the U.S. Army Corps, I believe. So I'm just curious. I mean, it's a technicality, but just something to be investigated, perhaps.
So this is Glenn. So generally, roads and canals, rivers, they're considered not to break. They don't break the contiguity. So if there's a street, the idea that the right of way is between the city boundary and the parcel across the street, that's considered a contiguous property.
And where is that language defined, or where do we find that language?
I don't know that it's in any place in the state code. It's not in our charter, but that is certainly the practice that's happened up and down the state. I can look for examples or look for where that actually flows from, Commissioner, if you want to see it.
Again, I'm just I don't want to go down the road with false expectations on people's, but so just again, it's a very in the weeds question, but just something to look at in the future.
Got it.
And I'd like to amend my statement. I made a statement earlier that lands on the west side of Route 1 would not be considered. Actually, if we indeed annex the entirety of that blue area, then we could annex on the west side of Route 1. I believe,
Right.
correct?
Mhm.
What we can't do is annex on the west side of Route 1 where it's discontinuous with abutting Rehoboth Incorporated.
That's right.
Yeah, thank you. Any other comments on the annexation map? So you've got at least one comment from the mayor on just leaving it as it is. Any further comments by the commissioners to help resolve this? All righty. We'll go on. Go ahead and continue, Lauren.
I guess, I'm sorry, one other question. Again, on the table 4-1 there, with regards to the color utilization there between city zoning classification and future land use, is the collapse of the residential R1, S1, 1 and 2, and C1, 2 and 3, what is, help me understand why that was done there.
So this was definitely, this was the reason for including this table here to clarify. Zoning and future land use are not the same. They're not the same thing. So what is required in addition to showing those annexation areas, the state planning has been pushing identification of future land use classifications for any property that is either currently within the city's boundary or within its annexation area or proposed annexation area. So this was done in concert with mapping for the future land use map to show what the previous planning consultants take on preferred future land use classifications would be. So to simplify it, on that future land use map, there would be an area, let's say it was shown in red, so it was commercial. All that is saying is that this is an area that should have some kind of a commercial use in the future. Then if there was a rezoning or an annexation, appropriate zoning classifications related to that future land use would be either the C1, 2, or 3 district. So this is not in any way suggesting that we condense the number of zoning classifications or make a change to the zoning map itself. It's just providing a little bit more generalized look at the actual uses of land that would be the city's preference generally in the future.
Okay, thank you very much.
Lauren, Lauren.
And Tom or Glenn, if you have any additional thoughts on that, or I hope that was clear in that description.
Would you put up your map 8 future land use, and let's take a look at that real quick, Lauren?
Yes. Let's see.
This is Tom West. While Lauren's bringing that up, I would just say that future land use map is different than a zoning map, but a very important tool to work with. It provides guidance for the zoning that's yet to come. I think that you can consolidate them if that gives proper guidance, but if you need to differentiate about the neighborhood character or things like that, you can maintain classifications of residential and commercial. So the earlier consultant, the current approach is to consolidate all residential. You know, they built the future land use map from the zoning basically. So they consolidated the residential and commercial. I've seen it where they're building the future land use map from their visions for the city. If that changes, they would build that into the map. And when I looked at the 2010 CDP, although it doesn't have a future land use map, it does show redevelopment areas. That's something good to represent on a future land use map if the city's so inclined. So there is different ways to do it. I think the bottom line is it's good to have in the CDP a future land use map of some sort. And its real purpose is to provide guidance for zoning changes that would come up in the 18 months or even after that, to provide guidance to people making decisions at that time. And the one thing that comes up when we talk about this too, and I don't know if this is a good time to get into it or not, but there's the term force of law. Glenn, my thought is this is where it really applies the most, is how does a comprehensive plan relate to a zoning ordinance, is the mapping. I already mentioned 18 months. So after the CDP is adopted, the next step is to look at the zoning changes that are needed. And that's the ordinance, the districts, but also the map. Sometimes, and this is not uncommon, that during those 18 months, there's things as you pick into the details, you realize that you needed to go back and amend the future land use map. So that can happen in concert. But just for clarification, the state requires under this term force of law that the zoning map and the policies of the zoning order, or the regulations of the zoning ordinance, be in line with the CDP. Lauren mentioned they're not the same, and that's true. They just have to be when people look at it, is that they're not inconsistent. So that if it's a residential area on a future land use map, the zone should be residential. The zones have many more details about area and bulk requirements that aren't in the CDP, but in terms of types of use or strategies for mixed use, that has to be in sync.
This is Mayor Mills. Mike, Brian, I have down that our meeting is to have a hard stop at 12:30. Is that true?
Yes, sir.
All righty, so that gives us, so this might be appropriate. I think we could squeeze this in. I'd like to, is a clarification exactly of what Tom West was mentioning, clarification of the reference to 18 months. And that is on page 8-2, chapter 8 of the draft, indicates within 18 months of the adoption of a comprehensive development plan or revision thereof, amend its official zoning map to rezone all lands within the municipality in accordance with the uses of land provided for in the comprehensive development plan. I don't, based on some comments that I've read, I'm not sure everybody has a complete understanding of what that means, that they, for instance, think that a rezoning or land use change is automatic within the 18 months. And then the other item is within pages 2-2 to 2-3. That has to do with that the code further specifies that, quote, after a comprehensive plan or portion thereof has been adopted by the municipality, the comprehensive plan shall have the force of law, and no development shall be permitted except as consistent with the plan. Again, in reading some of the comments, I find that some may not have a complete understanding of this, so I've asked Glenn to address force of law and the 18-month provision. One of my examples, I think, for the force of law would be, okay, if you want, how does that apply to a CDP element that says we will rezone a portion of X Street from commercial to residential? That's one possibility. The other thing is within the CDP, it says investigate how to improve the streetscape and viability of commercial areas on Wilmington and Baltimore. How does that fit into the force of law? So maybe you could give us a quick summary on both of those, and we'll allow planning commission members as well as board of commission members to ask questions. You want to tackle both
Sure,
of those?
yeah. Happily, Mayor. Thank you. So, this all flows again from Title 22, which is the portion of the Delaware Code that deals with municipalities. But Chapter 7 specifically deals with Planning Commission, and that's the chapter that sets out all the comprehensive development plan requirements. So those two issues flow directly from Section 702 of Title 22, and Subsection C deals with the 18 months. So let's take that one first. It says the comprehensive plan shall be the basis for the development of zoning regulations as permitted pursuant to Chapter 3 of this title. Should a jurisdiction exercise its authority to establish municipal zoning regulations pursuant to Chapter 3 of this title, it shall, within 18 months of the adoption of the comprehensive development plan or revision thereof, amend its official zoning map to rezone all lands within the municipality in accordance with the uses of land provided for in the comprehensive development plan. In the very next section, subsection D deals with the force of law. It says, after a comprehensive plan or portion thereof has been adopted by the municipality in accordance with this chapter, the comprehensive plan shall have the force of law, and no development shall be permitted except as consistent with the plan. So the way it works is that you have this 18-month requirement. So if, for example, as you said, Mayor, the comprehensive development plan says an area of town is going to be rezoned from commercial to residential, you have 18 months to complete that. So during that 18 months, you would go through the normal process of rezoning. It's not an automatic thing. So you'd have to schedule a public hearing. The public would come and have input. And believe it or not, the commissioners could decide at the end of that public hearing process that they don't want to zone it from commercial to residential. They think it's a bad idea now. So what would happen then is you'd have to go back to the State Office of Planning Coordination and have the comprehensive plan amended to take out that requirement of rezoning. So it's not an automatic process. And the public hearing that would occur isn't a sham. It's not as if the public hearing happens and you have to rezone it consistent with the comprehensive plan. You can amend the plan to not effectuate that zoning. So here's where the force of law portion comes into it, though. If, for example, you say in an area of town we are going to rezone from commercial to residential, and the plan gets certified, and then 2 weeks later, an application comes in for a bicycle shop in that area of town that's said that the plan says is going to be rezoned from commercial to residential, the city is the city cannot even accept that application. It must reject the application because the plan says that area is going to be residentially zoned, and you can't approve a plan that's inconsistent with the comprehensive development plan. That would be an inconsistent plan. So that's where the force of law portion of it comes in. There's a case out of Kent County called Farmers for Fairness, and in that case, the plan anticipated a certain zoning and a certain density of housing units. And a developer came in asking to develop in accordance with the comprehensive development plan, but the county had not yet changed its zoning laws to be consistent with the plan. The county rejected the application and the developer sued, and the court said, no, you must accept the plan because the plan is consistent with your comp plan, and that developer was allowed to move forward with the zoning that was anticipated in the comp plan, even though the county had not yet went through the process to effectuate the zoning. So the plan is a real deal specifically with land use matters when they, the force of law is a real thing that that's why we sometimes say the words that we choose, especially in the land use section of the plan, have to be selected carefully so as to not provide opportunities that the city would prefer, not go forward. So some of the things in the plan, I think we're careful to say are aspirational type things, to allow some clarity that although the plan is the force of law, there are certain things within the plan that the commissioners should consider doing, but aren't forced to do it because the plan has been adopted. But that's kind of the way the 18 months and the force of law works. And I'm sure there are questions. So if anybody has any questions, please ask.
And thank you, Glenn. I think that's an abbreviated version, but I think it seems to be very. Are there any questions among the Board of Commissioners?
Yeah, I do, Susan.
Commissioner Gay?
When I first saw the future map and the collapsing of the residential and the commercial into one big zone each, I admit I was concerned about that. Now, I've since heard, I believe Lauren and Tom even said that it's okay to do that. But given the explanation that Glenn's just made about zoning changes, what happens if you have a zoning change within? Because my feeling is we need to not consolidate. We need to go the other way. I mean, it may very well be that there would be more zones in the future, not fewer. So, for instance, somebody mentioned Schoolview yesterday, earlier in the discussion. And there have also been some changes within commercial, C1, C3 kinds of things. How would that fit into this future land use map of having them all lumped together as one right now? Does it mean we can do anything we want within those zones or what?
So within that commercial area, yes, the commissioners would be able to further break down and create additional commercial zoning designations. And that would not be affected by that whole area that's just designated as commercial. You can have additional zoning areas there. Now, perhaps we'd need to go back because the table shows only 3 commercial zoning designations. We perhaps would have to go back to the state to modify the map to show that modify the table to show that there's more than 3 commercial zoning designations. But collapsing them and showing them as only one color on the future land use map does not prohibit you from creating additional zones.
Okay.
Thank you. Mike, would you mind if I called on some of your members? Steve Kaufman has his hand up. Steve, you're muted. Start over. Mike, I assume you're allowing me to do this?
That's fine.
Thank you, Mike.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, we can. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mayor. This is a very important section. I'm glad Glenn has given an explanation. I think one of the issues here for the 18 months is whether or not the city wants to adopt, and has been talked about in the draft, a new comprehensive mixed-use commercial zone with architectural standards, et cetera. One of the things that you might want to do as part of that, if that's desired, is identify in the future land use area certain areas of the commercial zone properties that might be eligible for that type of application. It's not something that you would do automatically rezoning, but it would be a zone that an applicant could apply for. But unless it was identified in some way in the future land use as appropriate for that particular piece of property or properties, for example, along Baltimore and I forget the other name of it, and the other street that we're trying to redevelop in the future. Wilmington, yeah. And so you might, for example, identify those areas or parts of those areas as appropriate for a new mixed-use commercial zone. You could do the same thing in the residential zones if you wanted to create, for example, a new transitional, as Commissioner Gay mentioned, zone that would allow for transition from commercial to residential, which would allow, for example, different types of units other than single family detached houses, but also maybe townhouses or other types of unit types, and maybe the use of a cluster zone. So if that is something that is desired in the comprehensive development plan, not only would you say that you want to perhaps adopt these types of zones, but you would identify areas where they might apply in the future. As I said, you wouldn't comprehensively rezone these properties. That would be, an applicant would have to come in and apply for it. Thanks for the opportunity.
Thank you, Steve. Any other commissioner, planning commission or commissioner? Any other comments by commissioners or planning commission members? I've got Commissioner Gossett.
Just a curiosity question. If a map that we designate something as commercial, would that prevent the city from later rezoning it as residential or vice versa? Residential to commercial, commercial to residential? Is that all through the public hearing process?
It wouldn't prohibit you, but you would have to go through a comprehensive plan amendment process to do it. So if the plan doesn't, in the future land use map, if it doesn't show an area, if it shows an area commercial and you want it to go residential at some point during the next 10 years, the plan would have to be amended before that zoning could happen.
Thank you.
Thank you,
But I'd say
Commissioner.
that's not uncommon. It really requires that analysis of a comprehensive plan amendment. You're going back and you're looking at transportation and facilities and infrastructure. So that you do that analysis to make sure that whatever you're changing is still takes into consideration all the aspects that a CDP usually considers. So it's done. You do it oftentimes simultaneously. But it's not uncommon to change or amend a CDP while new things have changed and your zoning, you're looking at a zoning change.
Thank you all for your comments. I would like to just reiterate, I think it's just incredibly important to reiterate and understand this 18-month note in the CDP. And Glenn, help me here, but if I say anything wrong. How I look at it is within 18 months of adoption of the CDP, any land use items such as rezonings have to be addressed. They would be addressed by conducting a public hearing. So the public would be allowed to go and give comments. There would be analysis and contemplation about it. And following that, at some point, the Board of Commissioners would take a vote on it. And if it's adopted, then the zoning is accomplished per the CDP. However, again, because as Glenn said, adoption is not automatic. If the Board of Commissioners ended up after that public hearing voting no, then the CDP is changed to indicate that rezoning will not take place. So again, what I want you to hear, and I'm going to have Glenn confirm that the adoption of zoning codes or amendments or land use things within the CDP is not automatic. Did I say anything wrong?
No, that's right. I guess the one additional point I would make is that, within the 18 months, nothing can be accepted by the city that's inconsistent with what's anticipated in the comp plan. So there's, you're sort of inching toward the rezoning happening because you're now not able to accept applications that are inconsistent. And then after the 18 months tick away, I'll have to look at that Farmers for Fairness case and see if the 18 months had already passed, because there may be a presumption at that point that the zoning, like you say, it's not automatic, but a applicant may be allowed to go forward with the zoning that's anticipated in the plan if the city has not acted within the 18 months to come into consistency with the plan or to reject what's anticipated in the plan.
Thank you, Glenn. So what I'm hearing as mayor is the lesson is that any land use items within the CDP should be addressed as soon as possible.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
yes.
Thank you. Any further questions? Commissioner Gossett.
Yes, just the aspect. I mean, this is very important information, but I would request that the city solicitor and the city planner, if they could gather their thoughts and perhaps present this in a written format so that it is consistently interpreted, that we all are starting from the same place for going forward. Not that it's inconsistently been stated here, but I would be great to have it in a written format so that we could all have the same place that we're starting with this information.
Thank you, Commissioner. Mike Bryan.
Yes, sir. Glenn, is there also some obligation or duty on the part of the city as part of this 18-month period? Somewhere I thought I read that within that 18 months, the city must basically bring the proposed land use plan into conformity with the existing zoning. Is there some process that has to happen where all of that syncs up together and is the same?
So yeah, let me make sure I'm clear. So within 18 months, if a zoning map within the plan shows something that's inconsistent with the existing zoning, yes, within 18 months, the city is required to, conduct the public hearing, take the vote, and bring the zoning into conformity with what's in the plan. If it chooses not to bring it into conformity with what's anticipated in the plan, then yes, the process is you go back to the state, inform them that you went through the process and you've decided not to do what the plan anticipates doing, and you request a comprehensive plan amendment to change the zoning that's shown in the map in the current plan back to the existing zoning.
Well, does this process require the city to conduct some type of analysis pretty quickly after the adoption of the CDP as to whether there are any inconsistencies between what the CDP designates as land use areas and what actually exists in the city?
There's no requirement of that, but as we go through this process, I mean, we should know before the plan is even certified if there are inconsistencies.
Okay.
Right.
I just wanted to point out that there might be some extra steps that need to be taken to make sure everything syncs up correctly.
Understand.
Mm-hmm. Any other comments by the Board of Commissioners, Planning Commission members? Thank you all very much for this little diversion. I thought it was very valuable, and thank you, Glenn. Mike, as chair, I would ask that maybe you give us a little forgiveness for taking up so much time and allow Lauren to be able to finish the day before we bring the meeting to a close. The commissioners are used to going overtime.
Yes, sir. Will Uber Eats deliver lunch, Mr. Mayor?
I can't hear you, by golly. Lauren, let's go ahead and resume. Thank you for the pause and your mention of that, Mr. West.
Let's see. So I think that discussion wrapped up our overall discussion of Chapter 4, Land Use and Annexation. I don't think I heard any other comments related to those items, so I will move on to Chapter 5. This is the chapter on housing and economic development. So here there is, we provide an inventory of housing, both in the recent history, so going back maybe a handful of decades, and then looking at existing data or the most recent data we have available. Here we talk about affordable and workforce housing, discuss the architectural design manual, and then also provide an overview of economic characteristics, some redevelopment activity, and some various resources both for housing and economic development. So the first comment that we had is that the section on the architectural design manual seems to imply that all teardowns and destruction of cottages is bad, and asks if this area should mention the ordinances, I believe, that were passed in 2017 or thereabouts that limited the FAR, and noting that because of that, this concern has pretty much been addressed. The second comment is to evaluate opportunities for dining establishments to expand outdoor dining, including utilization of public space and of neighboring spaces. Noting that this language mirrors what is currently under development, and that the Board of Commissioners will address more in January or more in toward the beginning of the year. A note that within the economic development piece, we should identify that one of the problems we found about attracting doctors and other young professionals with families to the area is the lack of top-tier K-12 education opportunities or alternatives for their children to attend. The next commenter did not think that it was the city's role to work with Rehoboth Main Street or the Chambers of Commerce to identify developers that could bring desired projects to the city. That was an action item that had been identified. The next note is that in theory, supporting and encouraging a variety of housing stock for all ages and income levels is a good goal, but realistically, with the cost of land outweighing the value of a dwelling, this may not be attainable, and some more discussion on that note is needed. And then a similar note is that Rehoboth is a higher income, affluent resort town, and that there is a variety of housing provided within the city, but that land is finite. And they didn't think that anyone would, for example, support partitioning single family housing into multiple dwellings. And that isn't the character of the city, and it shouldn't be. Just one note, relating to the discussion of affordable housing. That is something that the Department of State, I always get this one mixed up, sorry. The State Housing Authority, they are going to be looking for not only in the city position that we discussed earlier in the meeting to address affordable housing somehow, but they are going to be looking at how Rehoboth might attempt to provide for affordable housing. So there's a variety of ways that can be done, but just want to make that clear that that is a particular item that they will look for. The next comments that we had are that it's critical that the city visibly support businesses and the business district, and that there are several potential action items that should be incorporated to demonstrate that support and willingness to communicate, listen, and that's really key to retaining and attracting businesses to the area. The next comment is that we don't want Rehoboth to become the next Ocean City, noting that they saw an escalation in crime during the past season, and that the city meeting Rehoboth needs to commit to maintaining an upscale, unique, clean, safe, and crime-free business district. And then there had been some discussion about maintenance standards for existing private properties. And this comment related to that just notes that Rehoboth isn't a homeowners association. The city has safety and general property maintenance standards, and they're not sure that we need anything beyond what's already in place.
Any questions by the commissioners? Commissioner Susan Gay?
Yeah, first of all, Lauren, thank you for including all these comments in here. Just on the architecture design manual, I think that came up maybe in the first discussion that you had with the Planning Commission. And I have to say, I was very pleased to see that brought up and to want to bring that into the CDP. And I think it's also been suggested by the business community as well as the residential property owners, and there just seems to be sort of renewed interest in that. And so I was pleased to see that you picked up much of the information from the manual and put it into CDP. I would note that of the styles that are pictured, the examples shown, at least 2 and maybe as many as 4 of those houses have since been demolished, so they do not actually exist as examples of that style. That doesn't mean they shouldn't be included. We should perhaps include them with a note because I think it drives home the point that perhaps we are overdue at looking at architecture. When I say architecture, I also mean aesthetics. That's been mentioned too as having, either incentives or some sort of standards. So I'm personally pleased to see that in there. I think it reflects the desires of the community on that topic.
Thank you, Commissioner. Any other commissioner comments? Seeing none, hearing none. Lauren, go proceed.
Mayor, sorry. I can't seem to raise my hand. Can you hear me?
Oh, is this Rachel?
Yes, it's Rachel.
Go ahead, Rachel.
I just wanted to follow up on Commissioner Gay's comment. As part of that conversation that we had around this architectural manual, we did discuss the possibility and suggestion to update that manual. So I don't know, Commissioner Gay, if you heard that part, but I do think that's a good idea. I do feel like that manual, to your point, there are some homes in there that are no longer there, but there are certainly other examples that we can replace that with, and just do a quick review of that before we publish it in this CDP.
Thank you. Mike Bryan indicated this was more for the Board of Commissioners to speak, but I see John Dewey, you have your hand up. Go ahead. Unmute yourself.
He is not muted, but apparently he's having.
John, I apologize. We're not hearing you. There's something wrong with your audio connection, and we appreciate it. With that, I don't see any other commissioner comments. And Lauren, go ahead and proceed, please.
Chapter 6 discusses transportation and infrastructure. So here, the different transportation modes are discussed, whether that's from roadways, public transportation, to pedestrian and bicycle, and the other modes that are found within the city. It also discusses some of the various plans and programs that are taking place, not only at the local level, but also at the state level as well. We then talk about water resources, and in this instance, meaning drinking water, sewer, and stormwater, particularly, and the different components of those various infrastructure types. There's a brief discussion of solid waste and recycling efforts, and then some information on telecommunications, which I think all of us realize how important that is these days, especially with how the past year or so went with COVID. But the comments that we heard were that under the non-motorized transportation or the pedestrian and cyclist discussions, that we should highlight the ADA transition plan. It's the Americans with Disabilities Act, the transition plan to make sure that the facilities are ADA compliant, and the work that has been accomplished regarding that since it was first developed. It was noted that previously filling in discontinuous sidewalks was highlighted, but there hasn't been really much progress made on that particular item, and that has left voids in the sidewalk system. So we should perhaps add another recommendation to evaluate the need to address discontinuous sidewalks within the city. Another comment was to add a recommendation to develop an in-town public transportation option, for example, the Jolly Trolley, for residents or renters to move around the city without using their car. But a related comment was that there had previously been a proposal to extend that service through a residential neighborhood, and that was rejected, and there was some fairly extensive citizen disapproval toward that proposal, is my understanding of the comments that were provided. so that any expansion related to this should really remain in the commercial district rather than in the residential neighborhoods. Other suggested recommendation additions were to work with DART to improve or increase public transportation options to and from Rehoboth, noting that existing service is limited and can be unreliable, but if that was improved, it could help to eliminate some of the traffic that is present. Another suggested addition is to work with outside contractors to establish parking areas with private landowners to develop parking that is close to the town but outside of the town. There were some different opinions about congestion. Some of those were requesting that we provide more information, more similar to the language from the 2010 plan that characterized it as unbearable congestion versus this comment that the quote unquote unbearable congestion really only occurs once a year, and that's when the 4th of July fireworks event occurs. And then the last comment here relates to green infrastructure that should be added as an important component in the city. Commissioner Gay, you had brought this up when we were discussing the vision and positions earlier on, I believe. So this is where we had just addressed that or associated it with a particular slide, but just going back and reiterating that that is an important component to the city and is being added to future projects.
Thank you, Lauren. Any comments from the Board of Commissioners? Seeing none, proceed, Lauren. Thank you.
Obviously, we did receive more than just the comment here regarding environmental protection, which is the 7th chapter. This chapter discusses water bodies, so everything from the ocean and lakes to floodplains and wetlands, et cetera. There's a discussion of climate change and those impacts. There's also a section on land resources, trees, tree canopy, air resources, which includes some air quality information. There's some discussion about the dark skies initiatives, which is to keep the night sky dark by shifting light to only certain areas, like to the ground or toward buildings or where pedestrians would be walking, for example. And then there is a section on parks and recreation. So the two comments that really were ones that we wanted to bring up here, we had a lot of comments saying that we should consider developing a dog park, identify a location. This was also comments that came in through the community survey. But this comment notes that this was an item that was brought to the Animal Issues Committee and was rejected. I believe that was due to some environmental concerns about being able to locate a dog park within the city in a way that was still environmentally conscious and wasn't disrupting the natural resources in the areas. So the suggestion was to mention that it has been addressed, but unfortunately rejected, and then to eliminate this as an action item. And then the next is just asking to provide more information on what is meant by the terms Silver Lake recovery.
Thank you, Lauren. Any commissioner comments? I see no commissioner comments. We'll move along. Please, Lauren.
And that is really, that's really it. Chapter 8 is our chapter on implementation, and that, while that does discuss some of the required implementation actions, so related to the rezoning, a requirement to review and update the plan with a certain frequency, etc. It then also provides some information on some other implementation tools. So whether those are operational or financial or regulation updates, etc. The bulk of this chapter is really reiterating the goals and action items that are previously identified in other sections, and really just providing all of those in one location that can serve as a guide for implementation efforts. So any changes that we do make to the goals and action items in the preceding chapters, we will reflect those in this chapter as well. The only other items are the appendices, and those are really more informational. So we're looking at incorporating some acronyms and definitions, some resources and references that we've utilized or can lend additional insight into some various issues, providing a more in-depth overview of the community engagement efforts, and then including public comments. So when we open the official public comment period, keeping that log of comments as they come in, that can either be incorporated as a true appendix or just make reference that they're available within the city, whichever way is preferred. And then really just wrapping it up with the adoption documents once we get to that point in the project.
Thank you. Before Mike wraps this up, I'd like to address the Board of Commissioners one more time. I have on my calendar that December 21 is when we will be receiving draft number 3 of the CDP, and that our next joint meeting with the Planning Commission is on Friday, January 14th in the next year, beginning at 2:00 p.m. That time allows us to give some additional input before the following meeting with the Planning Commission, in which they give final support of the CDP and approve its submittal to the PLUS group. With that, I'd like to, even though we're off overtime, if you could keep your comments very short, just give the commissioners one last time to offer whatever they'd like. Commissioner Gay?
I just have a couple of quick questions and clarifications. First of all, will the appendices be in the draft 3 that is circulated for public comment as they exist today, all the appendices?
That is our intention, yes.
Okay. All right.
Those that can be developed, obviously, adoption documents, that is later down the road.
And what are the beginning and end dates of the public review? I know it starts on December 21st. What's the deadline for public comment?
Good question. I apologize. I do not think I have the schedule in front of me.
Well, let me tell you why I asked. First of all, there are, and this presentation today has been very helpful because it has been updated to really reflect the comments that the Planning Commission had made, as well as the comments that we made on draft 2. So we're getting certainly closer to draft 3. On the other hand, the sense I have from looking at everything that's been posted is that there are just tons and tons of corrections and comments, and I don't know to what extent all of those are going to be factored into the final draft. And I think we need another opportunity to look at it and to to make changes as an approving body. So I don't know at what point that gets done, whether that gets done at our January meeting, whether that gets done, after ideally you would do it after the public has had an opportunity to comment. So I'm just not sure where that comes in, or whether what we see next is going to incorporate everything that's been said up to this point or not. And I guess that same question goes for the Planning Commission review.
We just held a conference call with the city yesterday to discuss updating the CDP website. So that is going to happen early next week, so that will be the location where the public can access the draft document. And there will be more information about how to submit comments, who they get submitted to, and the timeline itself. So that will be forthcoming. It is our intent, we've been going through and making adjustments to draft number 2 based on comments received from the Board of Commissioners, as well as comments from the Planning Commission members related to draft 1, that those changes had not been made for draft 2 because we had yet discussed them. So we didn't want to prolong this meeting with all of the comments that are, for lack of a better term, easy to make, or they make sense, or it's more of a formatting or something like that. So we do have a running list of those comments, and along with the revised draft 3 that you'll be getting on the 21st, we'll also have the revision matrix that lists the comments, where the comment originated, and then how or where it's being addressed in draft 3. So in addition to all of those written comments, I know I and my colleagues have been taking copious notes so that we can hopefully address the verbal comments that we've heard both from this meeting and the previous Planning Commission meetings.
That's great. You've got your work cut out for you. Thank you. This is great.
Be a long weekend.
Thank you, Susan, Lauren. Commissioner Gossett, you have some final words, please.
Just, I certainly appreciate this meeting today. I think it's brought out some of the comments that all of us have decided to place forward on it. And I look forward to Lauren's recapitulation of draft 3, what have you. One thing that I did not see, and it's a large volume of paper to read through, and I don't know if I just missed it or what have you, but I did not see any comments about beach overcrowding. And I don't know whether that's something that should be addressed in the CDP, or that's such a more of an immediate problem. But I'm just curious as to if you want to talk about that in the Planning Commission under your next draft review or what have you. But that's certainly a definite problem. We're talking about traffic and pedestrians and what have you, but I didn't see, and perhaps it's in there, that the beach overcrowding aspects were addressed at all.
Thank you, Commissioner. With that, as mayor, I want to thank all the members here today, and especially the Planning Commission. You have devoted an incredible amount of time and committed a great amount of time to doing this. Your comments are well received, and appreciate it. And ditto for the Board of Commissioners. Are there any further comments by the commissioners? I see none. So I'm going to turn it back over to you, Mike.
All right, sir. Make sure that I'm unmuted. In looking at the schedule, the really hard deadline is February 1st, when the CDP must be filed with the state for plus approval. If you work from that date backwards, we've got a Planning Commission meeting scheduled January 5th. We've got a joint Planning and Board of Commissioners meeting on January 14th. We have a Planning Commission meeting on January 21st to approve.
No, 20th.
Is that 20th? Is that January 20th?
January 20 at 2:00 p.m.
Okay. So really, looking at that schedule, everything needs to be pretty much wrapped up for the CDP by January 20th. And I thought Commissioner Gay's comment was right on. When do you want your response deadline to be for the public? This is for Lauren and Tom. And number two, do you want the public comments to be in writing? Somehow I thought we had discussed that some time ago. But number three, what is the deadline for public comment so that the public understands if they're past that deadline, their comments may not be considered? I think we need to have some clarity on that. So I throw that out there. I'm not sure we can come up with a decision on that today, but I think we do need to make one. Certainly the 21st of December, when version number 3 goes live, that starts the public comment period. That also starts another comment period from the Planning Commission and from the Board of Commissioners. But at some point, we need to wrap up comments so that Lauren Wallace Montgomery can go ahead and complete their work and have a final product that comes back to us as late as January 20th. So I think we have a compressed time here. And I don't know that we can establish that today. Perhaps we can put it on the city website after further discussion, but I think that needs to be addressed as a housekeeping matter. And for my part, I thought today was excellent. And I believe it or not, I think it helped that the Planning Commission did not actively participate by and large, because it gave me at least an opportunity to sit and listen and think about what was being said. I think sometimes you lose that perspective when you're part of the active debate. So I appreciate what was done today and everybody's cooperation. That's all I have at the moment. Nan Hunter.
Muted.
You're muted, Nan. Okay.
Okay, I think I did it now. All right. I agree that the hard deadline for public comment should be January 20th, I think you said, because that's the day before the meeting where we supposedly will approve it. But in terms of posting a notice to the public or doing any kind of, not advertising, but encouraging of comments, I think we should encourage comments by January 13th. That is before the next joint meeting. And the other thing that I think could be worked in, or maybe even January 5th, although that is so short, I guess January 13th is a bit more reasonable. But also the public discussion, the way the calendar is describing meetings, it describes the January 5 meeting as public discussion in the CDP. So I'm guessing that public comments would be in order at that time.
Okay. Unless somebody has an objection, I think Nan's suggestion that January 13th be the deadline for public comment, for the filing of public comment. Does anybody have an objection to that? Okay.
This is Lauren. If I could just make a clarification.
Mm-hmm.
So the Planning Commission will ultimately have to hold their own public hearing related to this effort, but that won't take place until after we've received comments back from the state, the county, neighboring jurisdictions, and we've received all of the public comment. We have identified about a more or less a 60-day period, because that's how long it will take between the time we submit comments to the state to the time that we will get them back. So that's really driving that time period. The reason that we're asking for comments so close to toward the beginning of that process is that we want to make sure that if there are any substantial updates that are needed based on any public comments that we hear, that those get incorporated into the draft before it gets shared with the state. Otherwise, we have to restart that state review process again, which we're trying to stay away from that. So it's not that we won't be still listening to public comment and incorporating that, but if there are more major comments that have a bigger or more significant change, we really need those sooner rather than later so that we can meet that February 1st deadline of submission to the state agencies.
So Lauren, are you saying that really the January 13th deadline is to establish an expectation by the public and the members of these bodies that if you want what you have to say to appear in what gets filed with the state, you got to do it by January 13th, but that subsequent to January 13th, during the period in which the state is reviewing this process, and prior and further down the road, the Planning Commission will have a public hearing about the CDP. Other comments could come in, but there's no assurance that they'll be included after that January 13th date. Is that correct?
Correct. Any changes that are made based on comments received after we submit to the state, those we would have to tailor them so that they fit within basically any comments that we hear from the state. So we're able to respond directly to state comments and make revisions based on the comments that we hear from the state agencies. And they just traditionally provide a pretty broad package of comments, not saying that the city has to do any one thing or another. There are a few items that have to be addressed for the plan to be certified, but the bulk of that comment letter is recommendations that the state's saying, we recommend that you incorporate this topic or include more information about this or that. So that's really that divide. If there are, again, we really want comments. Sooner is always better than later, but there will be those, the potential for those future opportunities. So we'll provide some more information on this on the project website that will be good to go on Tuesday, December 21st at the latest, in conjunction with the release of the draft. I'm working with city staff on that piece of it. We are requesting that those comments be in writing, and we'll again provide more information on that. It's a little easier to sort of catalog them and address them. But as I mentioned, there will be a public hearing. There will be, it'll be handled the same way that you handle other public hearings. And at that point, once that concludes and you're comfortable with the draft and it's incorporated the components that the Planning Commission wants it to, you then recommend the plan be adopted, but you send it to the Board of Commissioners for them to then review, and they're ultimately the adopting body. So the Planning Commission doesn't specifically approve the comprehensive plan. You develop the draft that you're comfortable with, that you feel is ready for adoption, and you make that recommendation to the Board of Commissioners for them to start their review process.
Very good, thank you. So I think what the operating rules as we have them today are, if you want to make comments to the CDP, to the draft number 3, please have them in by January 13th. Anything else? I think then we are set for our meeting on January 5th. And Merry Christmas and Happy Holidays to everybody. Thank you.
Thank you, Mike. Thank you, Mike, for allowing us to join you.
Yes, sir. Thank you.